Salesperson humiliates. Eric and Lara Trump. Donald's revenge was historic. The morning started like any other at the Trump residence. Lara Trump stood before their bedroom window, watching the October sun paint Manhattan's skyline in shades of gold. Her reflection in the glass caught her attention. At 41, she still turned heads, but lately she'd been feeling the weight of the past few years. "Eric?" she called out, hearing her husband shuffling papers in his home office next door. "Have you seen my blue Hermes scarf?" "Check the hallway closet." Eric's voice carried through their penthouse. "You wore it to dinner with Don and Kimberly last week." Lara smiled, remembering the evening. It had been a rare moment of peace in their chaotic lives, just family enjoying each other's company without cameras or critics. She found the scarf exactly where Eric said it would be. "What would I do without you?" she said, appearing in his office doorway. Eric looked up from his laptop, dark circles under his eyes betraying another late night of work. At 39, he carried himself with the measured demeanor of someone who'd grown up under constant scrutiny. "Probably still be that beautiful television producer I met all those years ago," he teased. "Speaking of vehicles," Lara began, perching on the edge of his desk. "The Range Rover's making that noise again." Eric leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his short blonde hair. "The one the mechanic said he fixed last month?" "The very same. Cost us $3,000, and it's worse than before." Lara pulled out her phone, scrolling through her photos. "Look at this. The warning lights are like a Christmas tree." "Maybe it's time," Eric said thoughtfully. "We've been talking about upgrading for a while now." Lara's eyes lit up. "Really? You mean it?" "Well, it is our anniversary next week." Eric stood up, wrapping his arms around her waist. "And I may or may not have been saving up for something special." "Eric Trump, you sneaky man," Lara playfully swatted his chest. "Is that why you've been working late so much?" "Partially," he admitted. "The business needs attention, but I've also been putting aside funds. You deserve something reliable, something safe." "Have you looked at anything specific?" Lara asked, already pulling up car websites on her phone. "Actually," Eric walked over to his desk drawer and pulled out a glossy brochure. "I might have done some research." Lara gasped when she saw the Mercedes-AMG logo. "You're not serious!" "The new GLS 600, Eric said, flipping to a page he'd clearly viewed many times. "Top safety ratings, plenty of room for the kids and dogs, and," he paused for effect, "heated and cooled cup holders." "Now, you're just showing off." Lara laughed, but her eyes were glued to the photos. The black Mercedes SUV looked magnificent, a perfect blend of luxury and functionality. "Want to go look at it?" Eric suggested. "I heard Manhattan Luxury Motors just got a few in stock." Lara hesitated. "Are you sure? I know things have been complicated with some businesses lately." Eric understood her concern. The Trump name carried weight, both positive and negative, especially in New York. "We're just customers looking to buy a car," he said firmly. "Nothing more, nothing less." "Let me change first," Lara said, excitement overtaking her apprehension. She disappeared into their massive walk-in closet, emerging 15 minutes later in a casual but elegant outfit. Designer jeans, a cream cashmere sweater, and subtle gold jewelry. "Perfect," Eric approved, already calling for their driver. The ride downtown was filled with animated conversation about colors, features, and options. Lara had pulled up every review she could find on her phone. "Listen to this," she read aloud. "The GLS 600 redefines luxury SUV standards. Oh, and here, best-in-class safety features make it ideal for families." "Aye." Their driver Thomas chimed in from the front seat. "If I may, Mrs. Trump, my cousin works for Mercedes Corporate. Says it's their finest work yet." "See?" Eric squeezed her hand. "It's meant to be." As they approached Manhattan Luxury Motors, Lara felt a flutter of nervousness. The dealership's glass and steel facade gleamed in the autumn sunlight, its showroom visible from the street. Through the windows, she could see several pristine vehicles, including a black GLS 600 that made her heart skip. "Ready?" Eric asked as Thomas opened their door. The cool October air carried the scent of fallen leaves and possibility. A young couple was leaving the dealership, the woman clutching keys and grinning from ear to ear. The man had his arm around her, both radiating joy. "That could be us," Lara whispered. Inside, the showroom was a temple to automotive excellence. The lighting was perfectly calibrated to make every vehicle gleam, and the air carried a hint of leather and new car smell. Classical music played softly through hidden speakers. A receptionist looked up from her desk, her professional smile faltering slightly as recognition dawned. "Welcome to Manhattan Luxury Motors," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "How may we assist you today?" "We're interested in the new GLS 600, Eric stated confidently. "Is there someone who can help us?" "Of course. Let me get our senior sales consultant." She picked up her phone, speaking quietly into it. While they waited, Lara wandered over to the black Mercedes that had caught her eye from outside. Eric followed, watching her face light up as she explored every angle. "The pictures don't do it justice," she breathed, running her hand along the smooth curve of the hood. "Look at how the light plays on the metallic paint." "It's called obsidian black," a voice said behind them. They turned to find a well-dressed Asian man in his 40s, his expression unreadable. "I'm Marcus Chen, senior sales consultant." Eric extended his hand. "Eric Trump, and this is my wife Lara." Marcus looked at the offered hand for a moment too long before shaking it briefly. His grip was loose, dismissive. "How can I help you today?" Something in his tone made Lara's smile fade slightly. She'd heard that tone before, from people who'd already decided who they thought the Trumps were. "We're very interested in the GLS 600, Eric continued, either not noticing or choosing to ignore Marcus's attitude. "Particularly this one, if it's available." Marcus glanced between them and the vehicle, his expression growing increasingly skeptical. "This particular model is fully loaded. The price point is," he paused, looking at Lara's casual attire, "substantial." "We're aware of the pricing," Eric assured him. "Could you tell us more about the features?" Marcus pulled out his phone, checking something. "Perhaps we should discuss budget first. We have some more accessible options that might be more suitable." Lara felt her cheeks grow warm. She dealt with prejudice before, but this was different. This wasn't political. This was someone judging them purely on assumptions. "We're specifically interested in this vehicle," Eric stated, his voice taking on an edge. "If you'd rather not assist us, we can find someone who will." Marcus's face shifted into something approaching a smirk. "Mr. Trump, let's be frank. This is a $160,000 vehicle, and our financing department has certain requirements. Given your family's recent financial histories in various ventures, I'm trying to save everyone's time here." The showroom seemed to grow silent, though other customers continued their conversations nearby, oblivious to the growing tension. Lara's hand found Eric's arm, squeezing it gently. "I don't appreciate what you're implying," Eric said, his voice low but firm. "We came here as customers, nothing more." "Oh, I know exactly who you came as," Marcus replied, his professional veneer cracking to reveal open disdain. "That's precisely my point. We've had some issues with certain family members' financial obligations in the past. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of our competitors, or maybe a used car dealership." Lara felt tears pricking at her corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from anger and humiliation. She'd faced criticism, protests, and hate before, but this casual cruelty, in what should have been a simple transaction, struck deeper than she expected. Eric's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. He reached for his phone, his hands trembling slightly. "You know what? You're right. We should be somewhere else. But before we go, I want to make sure I have your name correctly. Marcus Chen, was it?" Marcus's smirk didn't waver. "That's right. Senior sales consultant, Manhattan Luxury Motors. Feel free to look me up. I've been here 15 years, served celebrities, billionaires, and yes, even politicians. I know exactly who I'm dealing with." "Perfect," Eric said, his thumb moving over his phone screen. "Thank you for making your position so clear." Lara tugged at his sleeve. "Eric, let's just go, please." As they turned to leave, Marcus called after them. "You know, I always wondered if the stories about your family were exaggerated. Guess not. Have a nice day." The walk back to their waiting car felt endless. Other customers stared, some recognizing them, others simply noticing their rigid postures and Lara's barely contained emotions. Once inside the vehicle, Lara let out a shaky breath. "I can't believe that just happened." Eric wasn't listening. His fingers flew over his phone's screen, his face set in grim determination. "Eric?" Lara touched his arm. "What are you doing?" "Calling Dad," he said simply. Lara's stomach dropped. She knew that tone. She knew what it meant. What had started as a simple car shopping trip was about to become something much, much bigger. "Maybe we should think about this." She started, but Eric was already holding the phone to his ear. "Dad?" His voice was tight with controlled anger. "You're not going to believe what just happened." The car fell silent, except for Eric's voice, as he recounted every detail of their encounter. Lara watched his knuckles turn white as he gripped the phone tighter. She could hear Donald Trump's voice rising through the speaker, though she couldn't make out the exact words. "Yes, Dad. Marcus Chen. Senior sales consultant." Eric spelled out the name. He made it very clear that it was because we're Trumps. He paused, listening. "No, he specifically mentioned financial obligations and past issues with the family." Another pause. Donald's voice grew louder. "I know, Dad. I know." Eric's jaw clenched. "He did it in front of everyone there." Lara stared out the window at the passing city streets, remembering simpler times when they could walk into stores without scrutiny, when their name didn't immediately trigger reactions. She thought about the young couple they'd seen leaving the dealership earlier, their faces full of joy. That's all they'd wanted, just a normal, happy moment buying a car. "Thomas," she called softly to their driver, "could you take us to Central Park? I need some air." Eric covered the phone with his hand. "Honey, Dad wants to know if you're okay." "I'm fine," she said automatically, the way she always did when these things happened. But her voice cracked slightly, betraying her. Eric spoke into the phone again. "She's upset, Dad. We both are." Another pause. "Yes, I understand. Yes, we'll talk soon." He ended the call and let out a long breath, his hand still shaking slightly. "What did he say?" Lara asked, though she already knew the answer. "He's furious," Eric replied, staring at his phone. "Said no one treats his family this way. He's—" Eric hesitated. "He's going to handle it." Lara's heart sank. She'd seen what handling it meant before. "Maybe we should just let it go. We can try another dealership or—" "No," Eric cut her off, his voice firm. "Not this time. That man didn't just insult us, Lara. He humiliated you. Made assumptions about our character, our finances." He shook his head. "Dad's right. There have to be consequences." Thomas pulled up alongside Central Park. Lara stepped out, needing to move, to process. Eric followed, nodding to their security detail as they fell into step behind them. The park was busy with joggers, tourists, and families, enjoying the autumn weather. A few people did double takes as they recognized the couple, pulling out phones to take pictures or whisper to companions. Lara barely noticed anymore. It was just part of their reality. "Remember when we first started dating?" she asked suddenly, stopping by the pond. "How you took me to that little Italian restaurant in Brooklyn?" Eric smiled, despite his anger. "Vincenzo's. They had no idea who I was." "Exactly. The service wasn't special because of our name. It wasn't terrible because of our name. It was just normal." Lara turned to face him. "I miss normal, Eric." He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I know. I do too." His phone buzzed, a text from his father. "Check Truth Social in 10 minutes. Nobody disrespects my family." Eric showed Lara the message. She closed her eyes, resigned. "There's no stopping this now, is there?" "Would you want to?" Eric asked. "After how he treated us?" Lara thought about Marcus Chen's smirk, his deliberate cruelty masked as professional concern. She thought about all the times they'd swallowed their pride, walked away, tried to be the bigger people. Each incident alone seemed manageable, but they added up, death by 1,000 cuts to their dignity. "No," she admitted finally, "I guess I wouldn't." Eric's phone buzzed again. This time it was Don Jr. "Dad told me what happened. That dealership doesn't know what's coming." More messages started flowing in as word spread through their circle. Kimberly, Jared, and Ivanka. Family friends, all expressing outrage, promising support. "It's starting," Eric said quietly, watching his phone light up with notifications. A young woman walking past recognized them, her eyes widening. She quickly pulled out her phone. no doubt checking social media for what was happening. That's how it always began: whispers, posts, shares. The slow build before the storm. "Should we head home?" Lara asked, suddenly feeling exposed. Eric nodded, already texting Thomas to bring the car around. As they walked back, he could feel the momentum building. His father's social media machine was about to unleash something that would change lives, maybe ruin them. Part of him wanted to stop it, to tell his father to let it go. But then he remembered Marcus Chen's dismissive handshake, his condescending smile, the way he'd made Lara's eyes fill with tears. The anger rose fresh in his chest. "Sometimes," he said, helping Lara into the car, "people need to learn that actions have consequences." As they pulled away from the park, Eric's phone lit up with his father's Truth Social post. The world was about to change for Marcus Chen and Manhattan Luxury Motors, all because of one man's choice to be cruel when he could have been kind. Thomas guided the car through Manhattan streets as the first shares and reposts began flooding social media. In the back seat, Eric and Lara sat in silence, both knowing that what started as a simple trip to buy a car had just become something much bigger. A story that would be talked about for months to come. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere across town, Marcus Chen was probably finishing up his day, unaware that his world was about to turn upside down. By tomorrow, everyone would know his name, but not for the reasons he'd spent 15 years building his career. "Let's order in tonight," Lara suggested softly as they approached their building. "I don't feel like being around people." Eric squeezed her hand, understanding completely. They'd been through storms before, but this one felt different. This one they hadn't started, but they would certainly finish. As their elevator rose to the penthouse, Eric's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The story was spreading like wildfire. Tomorrow would bring cameras, reporters, protesters, and chaos. But for tonight, they just wanted to be Eric and Lara, a couple who'd tried to buy a car and found themselves at the center of another media firestorm. The doors opened to their home, and Lara immediately kicked off her shoes, heading for the kitchen. "Wine?" she called over her shoulder. "Definitely," Eric replied, watching his social media feeds explode with activity. The day had started with dreams of a new car. It was ending with the kind of situation they'd grown unfortunately used to. But this time felt different. This time, they hadn't been the ones to throw the first punch. As Eric joined his wife in the kitchen, he knew that somewhere in Manhattan, Marcus Chen was about to learn a very expensive lesson about prejudice, pride, and the price of underestimating people. Donald Trump was in the middle of a campaign strategy meeting at Mar-a-Lago when his phone buzzed. The room fell silent as his face darkened, reading Eric's message. "Get me Truth Social now," he barked, pushing back from the table. His advisors exchanged knowing glances. They'd seen that look before. "Sir, about the polling numbers in," one advisor began. "Not now." Trump waved him off, already typing furiously on his phone. "My son and his wife were just insulted by some lightweight car salesman in Manhattan. Nobody does that to my family." His social media director, Jake Sullivan, leaned forward. "What happened, sir?" Trump's face was flushed with anger as he recounted Eric's experience. "This Marcus Chen character. Who does he think he is? Treating my son like some nobody off the street?" "We should think about the messaging carefully," Jake suggested, pulling out his tablet. "Maybe a measured response." "Measured?" Trump's voice rose. "I'll show you measured." He held up his phone, reading aloud as he typed. "Disgraceful treatment of my wonderful son, Eric, and beautiful daughter-in-law, Lara, at Manhattan Luxury Motors. This woke dealership and their nasty salesman Marcus Chen are everything wrong with America today. Time for my 100 million supporters to show them what America first means." Jake winced slightly. "Sir, maybe we should." But Trump had already hit post. The room waited in tense silence, watching the numbers climb. Within seconds, the reposts started flooding in. Across town at Manhattan Luxury Motors, Marcus Chen was wrapping up paperwork on a successful Porsche sale when his phone started vibrating continuously. He ignored it at first. He was a professional after all. But then Sarah, the young receptionist, burst into his office. "Mr. Chen, you need to see this." "I'm with a client, Sarah," he said firmly. "No, you really need to see this now." Her face was pale as she held up her phone. Marcus excused himself and stepped into the hallway. His stomach dropped as he read Trump's post. already shared thousands of times. Below it, comments were pouring in. Boycott Manhattan Luxury Motors. Time to show these elitist snobs what we think. Marcus Chen needs to learn some respect. It was just a normal sales interaction, he muttered, scrolling through the growing tsunami of outrage. I treat everyone the same way. His phone rang, the dealership owner, James Richardson. Marcus, my office. Now. The walk across the showroom felt endless. Other employees watched him pass, their expressions a mix of sympathy and concern. Through the glass walls, he could see Richardson pacing, multiple phones to his ears. Close the door, Richardson ordered as Marcus entered. Sit down. Marcus sank into a chair, his professional demeanor cracking slightly. James, I can explain. Explain? Richardson slammed a phone down. Explain how you managed to antagonize the Trump family? Do you have any idea what's happening right now? He turned his computer monitor around. Their dealership's Google review page was being flooded with one-star reviews. Their social media accounts were overwhelmed with angry comments. The phone lines were jammed with people calling to cancel orders. It wasn't like that, Marcus protested. They came in, looked at the GLS 600, and I simply explained our financing requirements. By insulting their family's financial history? Richardson's face was red. In what world did you think that was appropriate customer service? They're the Trumps, Marcus said, as if that explained everything. You know their reputation with businesses, with payments? They're customers, Richardson exploded. High-profile customers with a massive following. And you treated them like. He trailed off, rubbing his temples. Do you know how many orders we've already lost? How many clients have called to distance themselves from us? Marcus's phone buzzed again, this time with a news alert. Local stations were picking up the story. Through the showroom windows he could see the first news van pulling up. I've worked here for 15 years, he said quietly. My record is perfect. My sales numbers were perfect, Richardson corrected. Were. Past tense. He turned to his computer, typing briefly. Check your email. Marcus pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly. The subject line read, Administrative leave effective immediately. James, please. It's temporary, Richardson cut him off. Until we can assess the full damage and decide how to proceed, use the back exit. There are reporters out front. As if on cue, Marcus's phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. Then another. And another. They're finding your contact information, Richardson said grimly. I suggest you turn off your phone and go home. We'll be in touch. Marcus stood on shaky legs, his world spinning. Through the window, he could see more news vans arriving. A small crowd was gathering, some holding hastily made signs. Sarah appeared at the door. Mr. Richardson, Fox News is on line 1. They want a statement. Richardson waved her away, then looked at Marcus. Use the service entrance. And Marcus, don't talk to anyone. Not the media, not on social media, nothing. The drive home was surreal. Marcus took back streets, paranoid about being recognized. His phone had over 100 missed calls and thousands of notifications. His email inbox was filling faster than he could clear it. His wife Linda was waiting at the door when he arrived home. What did you do? She demanded, holding up her phone. I'm getting messages from people I haven't talked to in years. There are comments on my Facebook page. It's being blown out of proportion, Marcus said, pushing past her into their apartment. It'll blow over. Blown out of proportion? Linda followed him to the kitchen. Have you seen what they're saying about you? About us? She thrust her phone at him. On screen was a message from her supervisor. Need to talk about your husband's situation. Concerned about impact on our firm's reputation. Marcus sank into a chair, the reality of the situation finally hitting him. I was just doing my job, he whispered. By insulting the former president's son? Linda's voice cracked. What were you thinking? They're the Trumps. Marcus stood up suddenly. Everyone knows their history with contractors, with payments. I was protecting the dealership. You were being prejudiced. Linda shot back. Judging them before they even had a chance. And now look what's happening. Their teenage daughter Amy appeared in the doorway. Dad, my friends are sending me screenshots. They're saying horrible things about you online. Marcus reached for her, but she backed away. I have to turn off my social media, she said, tears in her eyes. They're finding everyone connected to you. His phone buzzed again, another email from an unknown sender. The subject line made his blood run cold. You'll pay for what you did. Linda looked over his shoulder, gasping at the content. We need to call the police, she said. These threats are just keyboard warriors, Marcus insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. He'd seen what could happen when online anger spilled into the real world. The local news was doing live shots outside Manhattan Luxury Motors now. Reporters were reading Trump's post aloud, showing pictures of Marcus pulled from the dealership's website. His professional biography was being picked apart online, his past sales questioned, his character assassinated. I need to make a statement, he said suddenly. Explain my side. No, Linda grabbed his phone. You'll only make it worse. We need to lay low, let it blow over. But they both knew it wouldn't blow over. Not with Trump involved. Not with millions of angry supporters looking for someone to punish. Marcus's phone lit up with another call, his mother this time. Son? Her voice was shaking. There are people driving past our house, taking pictures. What's going on? He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of what he'd done crushing him. One moment of prejudice, of letting his personal feelings override his professional judgment. And now, pack a bag, he told Linda. Call your sister in Connecticut. We need to get out of the city for a few days. Run away? Linda stared at him. This is our home. Our life. Not anymore, Marcus said quietly, watching another threat appear in his inbox. Not after this. In their penthouse across town, Eric and Lara Trump were watching the chaos unfold on multiple screens. News channels were picking up the story. Social media was ablaze. Their phones hadn't stopped ringing. Did you see the crowd outside the dealership? Lara asked, showing Eric a live feed. Dad's post really struck a nerve, Eric replied. People are tired of being looked down on, judged before they even get a chance. Like we were, Lara said softly. Eric's phone buzzed, another message from his father. This is just the beginning. Nobody disrespects our family. Looking at the growing storm they'd unleashed, Eric felt a mix of satisfaction and unease. They'd wanted justice, but this was becoming something else entirely. Marcus Chen's face was everywhere now, his name becoming synonymous with prejudice and poor judgment. His 15-year career was imploding in real time, his reputation being shredded by millions of angry strangers. He brought this on himself, Eric said, but the words felt hollow somehow. The news channels were now running side-by-side comparisons. The Trump family's business empire versus Marcus Chen's career in luxury car sales. Experts were being brought in to discuss customer service and discrimination. Political commentators were framing it as another example of anti-Trump bias. What had started as a simple car purchase had become a national conversation about respect, prejudice, and power. And somewhere in the city, Marcus Chen was watching his life fall apart, all because he'd made the mistake of letting his biases show with the wrong customers on the wrong day. The storm was only beginning, and no one, not Eric, not Lara, not even Donald Trump himself, could predict where it would end. But one thing was certain, Marcus Chen's life would never be the same. By nightfall, the situation had escalated beyond anyone's expectations. Conservative media outlets had picked up the story, running special segments on elite discrimination against Trump supporters. Marcus's professional headshot from the dealership website was now being shown on national television. Breaking tonight, Tucker Maxwell announced on his primetime show, a shocking display of anti-Trump bias at a luxury car dealership in Manhattan. The question is, how many other businesses are discriminating against conservatives? In their Connecticut-bound car, Marcus and his family listened to the radio coverage in horrified silence. Linda kept checking her phone, watching their world unravel in real time. Dad? Amy's voice was small from the back seat. My school's parents' group chat is blowing up. They're talking about you. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter. Don't read it, honey. Just don't. They're saying we should leave the school, Amy continued, tears in her voice. That we're not welcome anymore. Linda reached back to take her daughter's phone. That's enough social media for now. Try to get some sleep. Marcus's mother called again. The local news is here, she said, her voice trembling. They're interviewing our neighbors about you. What should I say? Nothing, Marcus replied firmly. Don't say anything to anyone. Back at Manhattan Luxury Motors, James Richardson was in crisis mode. The dealership's parent company had called an emergency board meeting. Our stock is down 12% in after-hours trading, the CEO's voice boomed through the speakerphone. Every major news outlet is running with this story. What the hell happened, James? It was a misunderstanding, Richardson tried to explain. We've placed Marcus on administrative leave. Administrative leave? The CEO cut him off. He needs to be fired. Immediately. We need to distance ourselves completely. He's been with us 15 years, Richardson protested. His record is spotless. Was spotless, another board member interjected. Now he's toxic, and he's making us toxic. We've got dealerships across the country getting bomb threats. People are canceling orders. Our reputation is in flames, the CEO finished. Fix this, James. Whatever it takes. At Trump Tower, Don Jr. had joined Eric and Lara, bringing takeout and moral support. You should see the numbers, he said, showing them his phone. Dad's post has more engagement than anything in months. People are fired up. Maybe too fired up, Lara murmured, reading reports of threats against the dealership. That's not on us, Don Jr. insisted. We didn't tell people to get violent. We just exposed what happened. Eric's phone lit up with a text from Ivanka. Just saw the news. Are you guys okay? This is getting intense. Before he could respond, their father called again. Have you seen the coverage? Donald Trump's voice boomed through the speaker. Everyone's talking about it. Even the fake news media can't ignore this one. Dad, there are threats being made, Eric said carefully. Maybe we should. That's not our problem, Trump cut him off. They threw the first punch, remember that. They disrespected our family. Now they're learning what that means. After hanging up, Eric walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Marcus Chen was running from a storm they'd unleashed. It felt like justice, but somehow hollow. Linda's sister met them at her Connecticut home, ushering them inside quickly. The local news here is already asking questions, she warned. They found out you were coming. Marcus collapsed onto the couch, physically and emotionally exhausted. His phone had finally died, offering blessed silence from the constant notifications. How long do we have to stay? Amy asked, hugging herself. Just until this blows over, Linda assured her. But they all knew that might not be soon. Marcus's email inbox had over 10,000 unread messages now. His professional networking profiles were being flooded with negative comments. Former clients were publicly denouncing him. Friends and colleagues were distancing themselves, afraid of being caught in the backlash. At midnight, James Richardson sent out a company-wide email. Effective immediately, Manhattan Luxury Motors has terminated its relationship with Marcus Chen. We apologize for any offense caused to the Trump family and reaffirm our commitment to treating all customers with respect. The news alerts picked up the story immediately. Dealership fires Trump, insulting salesman. In their penthouse, Eric and Lara watched the latest developments in silence. The satisfaction they'd felt earlier was fading, replaced by a strange emptiness. Was this what we wanted? Lara asked quietly. Eric didn't answer. He was reading a new message from his father. Perfect. Now everyone knows what happens when they disrespect us. This is just the beginning. The night grew later, but nobody was sleeping. Marcus and his family huddled in his sister-in-law's guest room, wondering if they'd ever get their normal lives back. The dealership security team monitored growing crowds of protesters planning for tomorrow. News producers prepared their morning segments, knowing this story would dominate the cycle. And somewhere in the digital ether, millions of angry voices continued to call for blood, unsatisfied with mere professional execution. They wanted more. They always wanted more. The storm that had started with a simple car shopping trip was now a full-blown tempest, and dawn would only bring stronger winds. As Thursday turned to Friday, the world waited to see what new developments the morning would bring. What new targets would be found? What new consequences would unfold? For the Trumps, it was a reminder of their power, their influence, their ability to move mountains with a single social media post. For Marcus Chen, it was a harsh lesson in the cost of prejudice, the price of one moment of poor judgment in an age where nothing is ever truly private or forgotten. And for America, it was yet another chapter in an ongoing story of division, where simple interactions could explode into cultural flashpoints, where taking sides was inevitable, and where the collateral damage often extended far beyond the original participants. The night grew darker, but no one could sleep. Tomorrow would bring new developments, new angles, new consequences. The storm was still growing, gaining strength, hungry for more. The morning sun rose over Manhattan, illuminating a changed landscape at Manhattan Luxury Motors. Where yesterday there had been customers admiring sleek vehicles, today there were news vans, protesters, and hastily erected security barriers. James Richardson arrived early, slipping through the service entrance to avoid the cameras. The overnight numbers were devastating. Sales had dropped by 70% in just 24 hours. "Sir?" His assistant, Rachel, appeared in the doorway. "The executive team is waiting for the emergency meeting." Richardson straightened his tie, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. In the conference room, grim faces greeted him around the table. The video screen showed more executives joining remotely. "Let's get straight to it," he began. "What's the damage?" Sarah from marketing cleared her throat. "We've lost 80% of our social media followers. Our rating on Google has dropped from 4.8 to 1.2 stars overnight. Every review platform is being flooded with negative comments." "Sales numbers?" Richardson asked, though he dreaded the answer. Brad from sales pulled up a spreadsheet. 17 order cancellations since yesterday, 5 more this morning. High-profile clients are distancing themselves. The Stevensons? They were about to close on the Bentley. They've requested a full deposit refund. "Jesus," Richardson muttered. "What about the Chen situation?" Legal spoke up next. "HR has processed his termination. We've drafted a public statement distancing ourselves from his actions. But," she paused, "we're getting pushback." "What kind of pushback?" "Some are saying we threw him under the bus too quickly. Others are saying we didn't act fast enough. There's talk of discrimination lawsuits from both sides." Richardson's phone buzzed, another message from corporate. The stock was down another 8% in pre-market trading. Meanwhile, in Connecticut, Marcus Chen sat at his sister-in-law's kitchen table, staring at his laptop. His email inbox had exploded overnight. Among the threats and hate mail were messages from former colleagues. "Sorry, man, had to block you on LinkedIn, can't risk the association. You were always fair to me. But I have to think about my career. Why did you have to bring politics into it?" Linda placed a cup of coffee in front of him. "Any word from the headmaster?" Marcus nodded slowly. They think it's best if Amy finishes the semester remotely." "They can't do that," Linda exclaimed. "She's done nothing wrong." "They're concerned about disruptions. Some parents have threatened to withdraw their kids if we stay." Amy appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas. "I checked my phone again," she said quietly. "Everyone's sharing memes about you, Dad. They're so mean." Linda hugged their daughter close. "Don't look at that stuff, honey. It's not real." "Feels pretty real to me," Marcus said, closing his laptop. Another email had just arrived. His country club membership was being reviewed. Back in Manhattan, Eric Trump was in his office, watching the morning news coverage. Every channel was running with the story. Luxury car dealership in crisis. After Trump family incident. Social media storm destroys salesman's career. Trump effect. The high cost of disrespect. His phone rang. It was Don Jr. again. "You see the numbers?" his brother asked without preamble. "That dealership is bleeding customers. Dad's thrilled." "Yeah," Eric replied, but something in his voice made Don pause. "What's wrong? This is what we wanted, right? They're learning their lesson." Before Eric could respond, Lara walked in, holding her tablet. "You need to see this." She pulled up a video someone had posted. Marcus Chen's teenage daughter crying as she left school yesterday, surrounded by kids filming her on their phones, some chanting, "Trump, Trump, Trump." "They're going after his family now," Lara said softly. "His daughter's just a kid." "That's not on us," Eric insisted, but the words felt hollow. "We didn't tell people to do that." His phone buzzed with a text from his father. "The dealership's stock is crashing. This is better than any lawsuit. When we hit them in the wallet, they learn fast." At the dealership, the situation was deteriorating. A small group of protesters had gathered outside holding signs. "No more anti-Trump bias. Boycott woke business." Make sales great again. Richardson watched from his office window as more news vans arrived. His phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters, angry customers, corporate executives demanding answers. Rachel appeared again. Sir, the Andersons are here. They want to speak with you personally. The Andersons were their biggest clients. 3 generations of luxury car purchases. Richardson straightened his tie again and headed to the private client lounge. James. Theodore Anderson greeted him coldly. We need to talk about our family's relationship with this establishment. Of course, Mr. Anderson. I want to assure you that the incident with Mr. Chen was completely— Save it? Anderson cut him off. My grandchildren are being harassed at school because we have your cars in our driveway. My wife can't go to her charity functions because everyone's talking about our connection to this circus. We've terminated Mr. Chen's employment, Richardson began, but Anderson waved him off. Too little, too late. We've been clients for 30 years, James. But this? He shook his head. We'll be taking our business elsewhere. After the Andersons left, Richardson sat alone in the client lounge, head in his hands. The phone rang again. Corporate wanted another update. The numbers were getting worse. In Connecticut, Marcus was watching his own world continue to crumble. His phone rang, an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Mr. Chen? A woman's voice asked. This is Barbara Wilson from the New York Times. We're doing a story on cancel culture and social media mob justice. Would you like to tell your side? Marcus almost laughed. His side? What was his side? That he'd let his prejudices show with the wrong customer. That he'd forgotten the first rule of sales. Check your politics at the door? No comment, he said, hanging up. Linda came in with more coffee. The realtor called. She thinks we should list the house now before. She trailed off. Before everyone knows where we live, Marcus finished. Their dream home, the one they'd spent 15 years saving for, was now a liability. Back at Trump Tower, Eric was in a meeting with the family's business advisors. The discussion had turned to leveraging the situation. This could be a golden opportunity, one advisor suggested. We could launch our own luxury car dealership. Trump Motors, no discrimination, just American luxury. Eric's phone buzzed again. Another text from his father. The fake news media is going crazy. This is better than any campaign ad. Everyone sees how the elite treat us. Lara walked in, looking troubled. Have you seen the latest? She showed him her phone. Someone had doxed Marcus's mother, a 75-year-old retired teacher. Trump supporters were flooding her neighborhood, honking horns, leaving signs on her lawn. It's getting out of hand, Lara said quietly. What do you want me to do? Eric asked, frustration creeping into his voice. He started this. He's the one who made a mistake, Lara finished. A terrible, stupid mistake. But his daughter, his elderly mother, when is it enough? At the dealership, the day was ending, but the crisis wasn't. Richardson sat in his office, reviewing the damage. 70% drop in sales. Stock down 23%. Hundreds of canceled orders. Thousands of negative reviews. Dozens of high-profile clients lost. Multiple pending lawsuits. His phone rang one last time. Corporate again. This time, the message was clear. Either find a way to fix this, or start updating his resume. In Connecticut, Marcus and his family ate dinner in silence. Amy picked at her food, her phone mercifully turned off. Linda tried to make conversation, but the weight of their new reality crushed every attempt at normalcy. I got another job rejection, Marcus finally said. They didn't even interview me. Just said my current situation makes me unsuitable. It's only been 2 days, Linda tried to reassure him. Things will calm down. But they all knew better. In the age of social media, 2 days might as well be forever. Their lives had been fundamentally altered, their future rewritten by a single interaction that had lasted less than 10 minutes. The sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows through the dealership's empty showroom. The protesters had gone home, but their signs remained, littering the sidewalk. Inside, a cleaning crew worked silently, trying to remove the eggs that had been thrown at the windows. Richardson stood in the darkness, looking at the black Mercedes GLS 600 that had started it all. Such a beautiful machine, now tainted by association. Nobody wanted to touch it. Nobody wanted to be seen in it. His phone buzzed one last time, a message from corporate. Board meeting tomorrow. Bring your contingency plans, all options on the table. He knew what that meant. 30 years in the business, and it might all end because of one salesman's prejudice and one family's power to punish it. In their penthouse, Eric and Lara watched the evening news coverage. The story wasn't dying down. If anything, it was growing, taking on new dimensions, becoming a symbol of larger cultural divides. "Remember when we just wanted to buy a car?" Lara asked, a sad smile playing at her lips. Eric pulled her close, thinking about how a simple shopping trip had turned into this. A national scandal, ruined lives, a business in crisis. They'd wanted respect, demanded it even. But at what cost? His phone buzzed again, another message from his father. "This is just the beginning. Nobody disrespects the Trump family and gets away with it." The night grew darker, but nobody was sleeping well. Not Marcus Chen, wondering if his family would ever have a normal life again. Not James Richardson, watching his business empire crumble. Not even Eric and Lara Trump, who had wanted justice but found themselves wondering if the punishment had exceeded the crime. The aftermath was still unfolding, the ripples still spreading. The consequences still cascading through lives and businesses and families. And tomorrow would bring more developments, more angles, more fallout from a moment that couldn't be taken back. Late that night, Marcus's phone rang again. He almost ignored it, but something made him check the number. It was his old mentor, Robert Hayes, who had hired him 15 years ago. "Marcus." Robert's voice was heavy. "I've been trying to reach you." "Robert the First." Marcus's voice cracked. "I don't know what to say." "I watched it all happen. The news, the social media storm. I couldn't believe it was you they were talking about. The Marcus Chen I knew would never." "I messed up," Marcus admitted, sinking into a chair. "I let my personal feelings cloud my judgment. But this response, my family." "I know." Robert sighed. "Listen, I've been making calls, trying to find you something. But everyone's scared. The Trump name, it's radioactive in either direction." Linda appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. She could tell from Marcus's expression who was calling. "How's Linda holding up?" Robert asked. "Her law firm put her on leave," Marcus replied, his voice bitter. "Said they need to evaluate the situation. 15 years there, and now." "And Amy?" Marcus closed his eyes, remembering his daughter's tears earlier that day. "She's strong, stronger than me. But this isn't fair to her. She didn't do anything wrong." "None of you did anything to deserve this level of punishment," Robert said firmly. "A mistake? Yes. But this is something else." At Manhattan Luxury Motors, the night security team was dealing with their own problems. Someone had spray-painted Trump 2024 across the showroom windows. As they scrubbed it off, more protesters arrived, filming everything on their phones. "You can't wash away your bias," one shouted. "We're watching you." Inside, the cleaning crew found more hate mail that had been slipped under the door. Richardson's assistant was sorting through it, marking which ones contained actual threats for the police. Meanwhile, at Trump Tower, Eric couldn't sleep. He stood at the window, looking out at the city lights, remembering simpler times. His phone buzzed with a text from Ivanka. "Just saw Don's interview about the dealership situation. Are you sure this isn't going too far? Dad's loving it, but..." Before he could respond, another text came through, this one from his father. "Eric? Just saw the stock numbers. They're finished. This is what happens when they disrespect us. Keep watching. Tomorrow will be even better." Lara found him still standing there an hour later. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. "I keep thinking about his daughter," Eric admitted. "Amy. She's what, 15, 16, having to leave her school, her friends?" "We didn't tell people to go after his family," Lara reminded him, but her voice lacked conviction. "No, but we knew they would. We've seen it before. Dad's followers, they're passionate, loyal, ruthless," Lara added quietly. In Connecticut, Amy Chen sat in her temporary bedroom, scrolling through her phone despite her parents' warnings. Her Instagram was flooded with messages, some supportive, many cruel. Her TikTok had been brigaded by Trump supporters, forcing her to delete her account. She clicked on a news article about her father. The comments section was a cesspool of hatred. His daughter should learn her father's lesson. The whole family needs to leave the country. Make them pay. Show them what happens when you disrespect Trump. A notification popped up. Someone had created a fake social media account in her name, posting awful things. Within hours, it had gained thousands of followers. "Dad?" she called out, her voice trembling. "It's happening again." Marcus and Linda rushed to her room. Seeing the tears in their daughter's eyes, something in Marcus finally broke. "Enough," he said, taking out his phone. "I'm going to make a statement. Tell my side." "No," Linda grabbed his arm. "It'll only make things worse." "Worse than this?" Marcus gestured at their situation, hiding in his sister-in-law's house, their lives in shambles, their daughter traumatized. "How can it get worse?" Back at the dealership, the night brought no peace. The security cameras caught more protesters arriving, some taking selfies in front of the building, others leaving signs and messages. The night shift had been doubled, but they felt powerless against the tide of public outrage. Richardson's phone buzzed with another message from corporate. Emergency board meeting moved up to 7 a.m. Entire executive team required to attend. Prepare for significant organizational changes. The message was clear. Heads were going to roll, and his might be first on the block. In their penthouse, Eric finally came to bed, but sleep eluded him. Lara's words from earlier echoed in his mind. When is it enough? His phone lit up with another text from his father. The fake news media can't ignore this. They have to cover how the elite treat us. This is better than any campaign ad. The night grew deeper, but the storm showed no signs of weakening. In Connecticut, the Chen family huddled together, trying to find comfort in each other's presence. At the dealership, the security team watched more protesters arrive, powerless to stop the slow destruction of a business built over decades. And in Trump Tower, Eric and Lara lay awake, wondering if justice had turned to vengeance somewhere along the way. The digital mob was still hungry, still searching for new angles to attack, new ways to punish. Social media algorithms fed the frenzy, pushing the story to more eyes, generating more outrage, more calls for action. The machine of modern controversy churned on, indifferent to the human cost of its operation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new consequences. But tonight, in homes across the city and beyond, people lay awake, wondering how a simple car shopping trip had turned into this. A national scandal that exposed the raw nerves of a divided nation, a cautionary tale about power, prejudice, and the price of a single moment of poor judgment in an age where nothing is ever forgotten and no punishment is ever enough. 3 weeks had passed since the incident at Manhattan Luxury Motors, but the atmosphere in James Richardson's office remained tense as he prepared for the meeting with Eric and Lara Trump. The showroom below was eerily quiet, a far cry from its usual bustling activity. "Sir?" His assistant poked her head in. "They're 5 minutes out." Richardson straightened his tie for the 10th time, reviewing the numbers one last time. Monthly sales, down 73%. Stock price, down 42%. Customer cancellations, 234 and counting. Total estimated losses, $3.2 million. "God help us," he muttered, standing to look out his window. 2 black SUVs were approaching the dealership. Sarah from reception buzzed up. "Mr. and Mrs. Trump have arrived. Security is escorting them up." Richardson took a deep breath, remembering the board's final warning. "Fix this, or we'll find someone who can." The door opened, and Eric and Lara Trump entered, followed by their security detail. 3 weeks of media chaos had left its mark. Both looked tired, though they maintained their professional demeanor. "Mr. and Mrs. Trump," Richardson began, extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Eric shook his hand firmly. "Mr. Richardson, you wanted to discuss a resolution? Please sit." Richardson gestured to the leather chairs. "Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Water?" "We're fine," Lara replied, her voice gentle but reserved. She'd been following the coverage, seen the impact on the business. This wasn't a victory lap for her. Richardson settled behind his desk, choosing his words carefully. "First, I want to personally apologize for what happened here. Marcus Chen's behavior was completely unacceptable." "Was?" Eric raised an eyebrow. He was terminated immediately after the incident, Richardson confirmed. But that's just the start. We're implementing new customer service training protocols, revising our hiring practices. With all due respect, Eric interrupted, we didn't come here to discuss your HR policies. Richardson nodded, pulling out a folder. No, I suppose not. You came here because this situation has spiraled far beyond a single unfortunate interaction, and it needs to end. Across town, in a small cafe far from the media spotlight, Marcus Chen sat with his wife Linda, reviewing their options. Their savings were dwindling, and the job market had proven impossible. The house is worth less than we paid for it, Linda said, showing him the latest realtor's estimate. Everyone knows where we live now. No one wants to buy a property with that kind of attention. Marcus stared into his coffee. Robert called again, said he might have something in Chicago. Fresh start, different market. Running away won't fix this, Linda said softly. Your mother can't leave her home. Amy's whole life is here. What? Life? Marcus replied bitterly. She can't go to school, can't see her friends, can't even use social media without being attacked. Back in Richardson's office, the negotiation was proceeding carefully. We've prepared a comprehensive proposal, Richardson explained, sliding the folder across his desk. First, we'd like to offer you the GLS 600 at our cost. No markup, no games. Eric opened the folder but didn't look at it. And? We'd be honored to become your family's exclusive automotive partner. Premium service, priority access to new models, personal concierge. Mr. Richardson, Lara interrupted gently. This isn't about a car anymore. It hasn't been for weeks. Richardson's shoulders slumped slightly. No, I suppose it hasn't. This incident has cost us millions. Our reputation. Decades of building trust, all damaged in a matter of days. Because one of your employees decided to judge us before knowing us, Eric said firmly. To make assumptions based on our name. Yes, Richardson agreed. And now we're asking, what will it take to make this right? At the cafe, Marcus's phone buzzed with another news alert. He tried to stop checking them, but couldn't help himself. The headline made his stomach drop. Trump family meeting with luxury dealership resolution in sight? They're going to make an example of the whole company, he said, showing Linda the article. It's not enough that they destroyed my career. They want the whole business to suffer. You made a mistake, Linda reminded him. A terrible one, but this response, it's not justice anymore, it's vengeance. Back in Richardson's office, Eric was reviewing the proposal. The terms were generous. Beyond generous. The dealership was practically begging for mercy. Your father's post, Richardson said carefully. It was very effective. Your supporters are passionate. They're loyal, Eric corrected. They're tired of being looked down on, judged before they get a chance. Like we were, Lara added softly. Richardson nodded. The irony isn't lost on me. Marcus prejudged you based on your name. And now our entire business is being judged because of his actions. Actions have consequences, Eric stated. Yes, they do. Richardson looked out his window at the nearly empty showroom. But do the consequences fit the crime? My employees, good people who had nothing to do with this, they're losing their jobs. Their families are suffering. Lara shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She'd seen the reports about Marcus's daughter, his elderly mother, the innocent people caught in the crossfire. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. Richardson turned back to them. Accept our apology. Accept the car at cost. Let us make this right. And maybe consider posting about it? Show your supporters that when businesses acknowledge their mistakes and try to make amends, there can be forgiveness. Eric's phone buzzed, a text from his father. Don't let them off easy. Show them what happens when they disrespect us. But something had changed in these 3 weeks. The satisfaction of revenge had faded, leaving a hollow feeling behind. At the cafe, Marcus and Linda were preparing to leave when his phone rang. It was James Richardson. They're here now, Richardson said without preamble. We're trying to find a way forward. Is there? Would you want to? No, Marcus cut him off. I can't apologize publicly. The death threats, the harassment, it would start all over again. I understand, Richardson sighed. Good luck, Marcus. I truly mean that. In the office, Eric and Lara exchanged looks. The proposal was more than fair. The dealership had suffered enough. Maybe it was time to end this. If we accept, Eric said carefully, what happens to Marcus Chen? He's already gone, Richardson replied. His career in luxury sales is over. His reputation. He trailed off, leaving the obvious unsaid. Lara touched Eric's arm. Maybe it's enough. Eric thought about his father's text, about the power they wielded, about justice versus vengeance. He thought about Marcus Chen's daughter, forced to leave her school, about the dealership's employees, innocent people caught in the crossfire. All right, he said finally. We'll accept the offer. Richardson's relief was palpable. Thank you, I'll have the papers drawn up immediately, and the car. The black one, Lara said, the one we originally came to see. As they stood to leave, Richardson asked one last question. Will you post about this? About finding a resolution? Eric nodded slowly. Yes. It's time to end this. Later that evening, in their penthouse, Eric composed a new social media post. Proud to announce that Manhattan Luxury Motors has made things right. When businesses acknowledge their mistakes and make sincere amends, we can move forward. Excited about our new partnership. His father called immediately. What are you doing? We had them on the ropes. It's enough, Dad, Eric replied firmly. They learned their lesson. Everyone did. As the sun set over Manhattan, different people absorbed the news in different ways. At the dealership, Richardson opened a bottle of whiskey, celebrating the beginning of the end of their nightmare. In Connecticut, Marcus Chen saw Eric's post and felt a complex mix of relief and bitterness. His life was still in shambles, but at least the active destruction might stop. And in their penthouse, Eric and Lara sat in their living room, contemplating the cost of victory. Was it worth it? Lara asked quietly. Eric didn't answer immediately. They'd won. The dealership had bent the knee. Marcus Chen's career was destroyed. Their power had been demonstrated. But something felt different now. We got what we wanted, he finally said. But the cost was paid in a currency we didn't expect, Lara finished. Outside, the city continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent to the small dramas that played out within its bounds. The story would fade from the news cycle, replaced by new controversies, new battles. But its impact would linger, in Marcus Chen's shattered career, in the dealership's recovering business, in the subtle shift in Eric and Lara's understanding of power and its price. The black Mercedes would be delivered tomorrow, a symbol of their victory. But as they sat in the growing darkness, both knew that some victories feel more like defeats, and some lessons come at a price too high to celebrate. Eric's phone buzzed one final time that night. Another message from his father. Saw your post. Soft move, son. Should have finished them off completely. That's how you win. Dad still doesn't understand, Eric said, showing Lara the message. Does he ever? She replied softly. For him, it's always about the win, no matter the cost. In Connecticut, Marcus Chen was packing boxes. Despite the resolution between the Trumps and the dealership, there was no going back to their old life. The damage was done. Chicago might not be so bad, Linda said, trying to sound optimistic as she wrapped photo frames. Robert says the market there is different. People might not know. They'll Google me, Marcus replied flatly. That's what everyone does now. One search and it's all there. Every article, every comment, every moment of these past 3 weeks. Amy appeared in the doorway of her now empty room. I found this, she said, holding up a photo. It showed Marcus on his first day at Manhattan Luxury Motors, 15 years ago, young and proud in his new suit. Marcus took the photo, remembering that day. I thought I was going to conquer the world, he said quietly. Funny how one moment can change everything. Back at the dealership, Richardson was on a late call with corporate. The stock had jumped 12% after Eric's post, the first positive movement in weeks. It's a start, the CEO said. But we've got a long way to go. That Trump post better be just the beginning of their cooperation. They'll be picking up their car tomorrow, Richardson assured him. We'll make sure the photos are perfect. The press release is glowing. And Chen? Richardson glanced at Marcus's empty office, still untouched since that day. Gone. His resignation letter cited personal reasons. Good. Let's hope this whole mess dies down now. We can't afford another hit like this. In Trump Tower, Eric and Lara were getting ready for bed when Don Jr. called. Just saw your post, he said. Dad's pretty worked up about it, says you let them off too easy. Maybe that's the problem, Eric replied. Maybe easy and hard aren't the right way to look at it. What do you mean? I mean, look what we did to them. To Chen, his family, the dealership, all those employees. Was it justice? Or did we just prove we could destroy them? Don was quiet for a moment. They started it, he finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yeah, Eric sighed. That's what we keep telling ourselves. After hanging up, Eric joined Lara on their balcony. The city stretched out before them, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Marcus Chen was packing up his life. The dealership was trying to rebuild, and they were getting exactly what they'd originally wanted: a new car, an apology, a show of respect. You know what the worst part is? Lara said suddenly. That day, when we walked into the dealership, I was so excited, just to be doing something normal, something regular couples do. And now? Now I wonder if we'll ever have that again. If every interaction will be a potential battle, every slight a call to arms. Eric wrapped his arms around her, both of them staring out at the city. Tomorrow, their new Mercedes would arrive. The photos would be taken, the press release sent out, the story would begin its fade from the news cycle. But the ripples would continue. In Marcus Chen's shattered career, in his daughter's interrupted childhood, in the dealership's long road to recovery. Maybe next time, Eric said quietly. We let it go. Just walk away. Lara leaned back against him. Would your father allow that? Maybe it's time we stopped letting him decide. The night grew deeper, the city's lights reflecting off the clouds above. In Connecticut, the Chen family continued packing, preparing for their exile to Chicago. At the dealership, the cleaning crew wiped away the last traces of protest graffiti. And in their penthouse, Eric and Lara Trump contemplated the true cost of power, not in dollars or stock prices or social media engagement, but in the currency of human dignity and peace of mind. The black Mercedes would arrive tomorrow, perfect and pristine. But its beauty would always be tainted by the story of how it came to be theirs, a story not of simple car shopping, but of pride, prejudice, and the price we all pay when victory becomes vengeance.